That's Ferdinand. That's Ferdinand of Aragon. That's my impression of him neglecting his family. Hi guys, I'm Katie. You might know me from a show called Queen's Podcast. My friend Nathan and I get together and drink cocktails and talk about badass women in history. But today we're gonna do something a little different. Instead of talking about women in history, we're gonna talk about the asshole men that made their life miserable in a segment I'm calling This Fucking Guy. So grab a drink, because you might need it. Today we're going to talk about a guy called Ferdinand II of Aragon. If you're a longtime listener of Queen's Podcast, you've definitely heard of him, as he's been a major player in making 3 women we've covered completely miserable. And if you're not a follower of Queen's Podcast, you probably still know of him if you went to school in America. Him and his wife Isabella are known for funding Christopher Columbus's voyage to the new lands that people already lived on and had already been discovered before. Whatever. So, part 1 in this conversation, this fucking husband. So Ferdinand was part of the most powerful power couple in Europe at the time, if not the world. He was married to Isabella of Castile, who was the heir apparent to the land of Castile. Ferdinand's from Aragon, which is nowhere near as vast and powerful as Castile. So Isabella is a catch, let me tell you. So even though Isabella was the only heir in Castile, Ferdinand just kind of assumed that when they got married, he would become ruler of both Castile and Aragon because he has a penis. Because she's just gonna sign over all her rights to me, because how could someone with a vagina possibly rule a country? What are you thinking? You crazy. So when Isabella's brother finally dies and she does become Queen of Castile, Ferdinand happens to be away on war or business. So something you should know about Spain at this time in the 15th century, it was basically Game of Thrones. Drama, drama, drama. And Isabella knew that if she didn't rush to get crowned immediately, that she could get poisoned, she could get kidnapped. There was no end to what would happen if she didn't grab that crown as soon as she could. A queen's gotta do what a queen's gotta do, you know? Ferdinand is furious. So angry. When a coronation happens, it's setting the precedent for the people of that country of who is going to be ruling. If Isabella was crowned on her own, what does that leave for Ferdinand? What does that make him? In their marriage agreement, they had a clause that basically meant what's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. And so he took it as a slight that she went and got crowned without him, which we at Queen's Podcast call fragile dick energy. Make it trend, y'all. But Ferdinand was not at all sympathetic to her reasoning for going ahead with the coronation. I mean, for God's sake, her own brother had been assassinated by the other faction. It was a matter of life and death getting that coronation. But Ferdinand rocks back up in Castile and throws the biggest temper tantrum. They have this huge fight. But Isabella, being the amazing diplomat that she was, knew exactly how to calm Ferdinand down. She basically passed a decree. Anything passed in Castile, any paperwork, any laws, would be under the name of Ferdinand and Isabella. Never Isabella and Ferdinand. Because that's how fragile this man's sense of self-worth is. Honestly, Isabella was the better ruler and she was more popular. So, whatever, Ferdinand, you can have your name first. Despite all his flaws, Isabella was madly in love with Ferdinand. Like, dickmatized. Yeah, guys, I don't get it. I don't understand. That's why it hurt her so much when Ferdinand would cheat on her, which he did a lot. Like, a lot. Now at the time, it was normal for kings to have mistresses. Most queens would take it in their stride, but as we've discussed, Isabella's no average queen. She's nothing like any other queen in Europe at this time. She wants her lands, she wants her birthrights, and she wants a husband that's not going to cheat on her, which apparently in the 15th century was too much to ask for. She would go into these fits of rage whenever she would find out about one of his mistresses or his many illegitimate children that he had. I don't know, maybe if you're living in a land where you're the lesser popular, lesser powerful person and people are getting fucking poisoned left and right, maybe keep it in your fucking pants, dude. After 30 plus years of marriage, Isabella passes away. They're looking back at this dynasty they've built together, these children they've had together, and on her deathbed, she has one request. For the sake of our children's inheritance, do not get married again. I beg you, promise me this. Anyway, about a year and a half after she dies, he marries a French teenager. This fucking guy. Part 2. This fucking Inquisition. If you're not familiar with this blemish on European history, I will attempt to sum it up. Spain had a large Jewish population, and a few generations before, all the Jews had been asked to basically convert or leave. And being that there weren't exactly U-Haul trucks, moving out of a country was not an easy feat in the 15th century. Most of them converted. But in the 1470s, Isabella and Ferdinand decided that they hadn't converted hard enough. Convert harder, guys, come on, it's not that hard. And with the blessing of the Pope, many of the Jewish people there were questioned, often under duress, as to why they hadn't converted, are they going to convert, who hasn't converted yet, and it was a bloodbath, you guys. It all came to a head in 1492 when all the Jews were expelled from Spain. Now don't come at me, I know this was not the first Spanish Inquisition or the first Inquisition in all of Europe. There had been many, but this is by far the most famous, and usually when people refer to the Spanish Inquisition, they're speaking of the one under Ferdinand and Isabella's reign. And while Ferdinand definitely wasn't alone in this, he was 100% the ringleader. Isabella and Pope Sixtus IV both had reservations about the amount of torture, but Ferdinand was like a dog with a bone. Pope Sixtus was even like, hey man, like, maybe chill out with all the torture? Well, to which Ferdinand was like, oh cool, then you didn't want my army's support in defending Rome, right? I'll just take my army back. I'll just take that back real quick. But why? Why was he so into eradicating this whole group of people? Was it for power? He runs out all of the non-Christians out of Spain. He is gonna have the Pope in his pocket. Was it for money? No one had to repay their debts to these Jewish bankers now. So that puts more money back into Ferdinand's pocket. Was it for fame? He and Isabella are now known as the Catholic monarchs. The Catholic monarchs. That is a really awesome title when everybody you're working with is Catholic. This was really before the Reformation, so the answer, all of the above. Oh, and his great-great-great-grandmother was probably Jewish. Now on to part 3 of our story. This fucking father. While Isabella was fiercely dedicated to every member of her family, I don't think we can say the same for Ferdinand. This is evident in the treatment of 2 of his daughters, so let's talk about them. Daughter number 1 is the most famous, Catherine of Aragon. Oh boy, y'all. If you're any kind of fan of our show, you were definitely familiar with Catherine. Catherine of Aragon was sent to England as a teenager to marry the heir to the British throne, Arthur. Sadly, Arthur died just a few months after the wedding, leaving our girl Catherine in a little bit of limbo. Here's the gist of the situation. She had a big old dowry, which I believe is the contemporary term that they used. And the agreement was that half would be paid upon their marriage and the other half would be paid 6 months after. The problem was the groom didn't last 6 months after the wedding. This left Catherine's fate in the hands of, honestly, two assholes, Ferdinand and Henry VII of England. If you know anything about Henry VII of England, you probably know that he was a tight ass with money. And unfortunately, Catherine was a victim of that. Isabel had passed away at this point, so Ferdinand saw no reason to actually pay up on Catherine's dowry. Well, Henry saw no reason to pay for her household or her food or her clothing. So this kind of left Catherine as basically like a royal couch surfer. She was more or less in poverty. And of course not what you or I would think of as poverty, but for her, I mean, she still had to pay for her ladies in waiting. She was still expected to look like a princess whenever she attended royal dinners. It was a bad time. It was a bad time for Catherine of Aragon. So for 5 years, Catherine lived like this, and she continuously wrote to Ferdinand. He was well aware of her situation. She would beg him and be like, I am literally penniless, Dad. Please send me some money. To which Ferdinand responded, new phone, who dis? That's Ferdinand. That's Ferdinand of Aragon. That's my impression of him neglecting his family. Luckily for Catherine, Henry VII died in 1509, and his heir, Henry VIII, rode in like a knight in shining armor and saved our poor Catherine from royal poverty. They were married, and she eventually became Queen of England just like she was always supposed to. And they lived happily ever after. Don't Google it. Next, we're going to talk about his daughter, Juana of Castile. This is not a happy story. Isabella's heir was her daughter, Juana. Now, Juana did not have a great reputation for mental stability. She was known for her bouts of depression and madness. Like, modern day historians say that she probably had depression, definitely had postpartum depression, and maybe bipolar disorder. But many kings throughout history have been way worse off than her and have gone to live very long reigns. I'm talking to you, Charles VI of France. So, as Juana is moving into her lands in Castile to rule, Ferdinand thinks back to how he's always wanted to rule both Castile and Aragon on his own. And now that he has this mentally fragile daughter, he sees his chance. Juana and her husband arrive in Castile. Her husband is known as Philip the Handsome. I don't know why. So as soon as they arrive, Ferdinand really starts grabbing for the throne. He wants Castile in his own right now, and he does not give a fuck that it's his daughter that he's about to fuck over. Okay, actually, both her husband and her father can fuck right the fuck off. They were both horrible to her. This poor woman. Okay, I'm ready to keep going. But when Philip dies a year later and Ferdinand sees his daughter grieving, he takes this time to point out her mental instability. He starts all these rumors. If you've only ever heard one thing about Juana of Castile, you've probably heard her called Joanna the Mad or Juana la Loca. And this is where that comes from. It's a rumor that was spread by her own fucking father. This fucking guy, y'all. So the rumor was that after Philip died, Juana just couldn't bear to be parted with his body and would take his dead body to like dinner with her and sleep with it and kiss it. There is no contemporary source saying she did anything of the sort. These were all rumors spread by somebody. And who would it benefit for Juana to seem off her rocker? This fucking guy. And he was able to swoop in and usurp Juana's throne. So he couldn't actually depose Juana because her oldest son, the next in line, Charles, was being raised in Austria. And that meant he was being raised by the Holy Roman Emperor. And so that meant if he came to rule in his minority, the Holy Roman Emperor would be regent. And Ferdinand couldn't have that. So what he did was become Juana's co-ruler. Juana couldn't be in the picture. If people saw her, they would see that she actually wasn't crazy at all. Hey, she looks normal. She doesn't look crazy. She's not toting around her dead husband's body. So he has her locked away in a castle in a town called Tordesillas. She would write to him being like, just get me out of this place. It was not like a nice castle. It was ye old dusty castle. So Juana was in ye old dusty castle for the next 46 years. 46 years. Ugh. I told y'all this was sad. She wasn't even allowed to see doctors because they knew if a doctor came in to see her, they'd see that she was lucid and not stark raving mad. And there could possibly be a revolution in her name or a coup. So she was locked away without visitors or anything for the rest of Ferdinand's life. And then when Ferdinand died, along came Charles, who had been being raised over in Austria. He could have freed his mother. He could have brought her back to court, but no. Ferdinand had set the precedent of we can treat Juana like garbage. So Juana remained a prisoner for the rest of her life because of these fucking guys. All right, guys, that's all I can handle today. This was fun. If there's any fucking guy you want to hear about, let me know. Like and subscribe below. And if you're not a listener to our podcast, what are you doing? Bye, guys.